Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi, friends. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. This is where you'll hear one-on-one conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. They are entrepreneurs, authors, musicians, spiritual teachers, and adventurers. Though they come from a wide variety of backgrounds, what they have in common is that they are approaching the world by seeing the possibilities, not the obstacles. And I know that's not an easy thing to do these days. But today's guest, Chris Fagan, manages to see the light in every situation. Chris joins me on occasion to do a deep dive on a topic. And today we wanted to chat about how we're moving through this pandemic. Of course, she finds this all challenging, but she has a great perspective on the uncertainty of our situation and how to make the most of this time. We also talk about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and also how differently people are responding to the pandemic. As a little background reminder, I first chatted with Chris back on episode number 88 when we discussed her 560-mile, 48-day walk to the South Pole with her husband, Marty. So she's well aware of overcoming adversity. Please do share this episode with a friend or two. I know that hearing this conversation will help people feel inspired, perhaps a bit more uplifted and optimistic in the fact that we will get through this. Everyone could use a Chris Fagan in their lives, and short of being fortunate enough to know her in person, sharing this episode with others is the next best thing. One step further, if you'd like to show your support of the show, you can do so with a donation through Patreon. By becoming a part of our community, you'll have access to bonus content, which is usually in the form of a question I ask guests. As a Patreon supporter, you'll also get a heads up about what guests are coming up and have the ability to get your questions answered. You'll also be invited to join our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/bebold. If you'd prefer to make a one-time donation, you can do that too via Venmo or PayPal, and that information is all on the Patreon page. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Chris Fagan. Chris, last time we chatted, it seems like eons ago, which is just crazy. It was in person at the library on, I think, Mercer Island. And things were just starting to get weird and to start shutting down. And we just didn't know what was going on at that point. And then we just haven't seen each other since, which is so sad.
I can't believe it. I literally looked back. It's been 4 months. I was like, oh my goodness, 4 months is just in a vacuum.
I know. Isn't it weird how much, like how short a time it is, but how much has changed like since that time? I think one of the things that almost helps me right now is realizing that whatever I learn or read or hear today is probably going to be irrelevant tomorrow or in 2 days. So I try not to give it too much credit. I take everything kind of with a grain of salt. Like I read and I understand and I, try to keep up with things, but I also just realize it's going to be a different world in 2 days. So don't get too caught up in it.
No, I completely agree. When we look forward to like when my son goes up to college in a month, we're like, oh, in a month. That could be different. We don't know.
Is that the plan right now that he'll be off at school?
It is. He's going to Montana State in Bozeman, Montana. And, their plan is to still have students arrive on campus. They have one of the lower episodes of, they don't have as many COVID type cases there. So that's the
good.
Plan.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. There's some normalcy for you guys, at least.
A little bit, although it's exciting and also concerning. So, this is the state, right?
So how are you dealing with all this? Like since I can't even, you said it was just as 4 months ago, I can't even think of all the things that I did or didn't do since that time, But how are you coping with all of this, like with the shutdown and everything, like business-wise and personally and activity-wise?
I'll just dive into business for a second, So I'm a consultant and my whole livelihood is, leading groups of people in meetings and creative brainstorming. And so that's really always done in person, and also speaking, which is usually done in person. So it's really been, at first it was this, everything shut down. Then companies are trying to kind of come back. They still want to do some of the things that I offer. So I actually just spent a lot of time retraining myself really, really quickly in some online tools for brainstorming. And also, of course, we've all been using Zoom and those kinds of products to meet face to face. But I've had clients call me and say, hey, we need to do this project. We're remote. You've trained us to use this creative problem solving. Can you do it? Can you train us online to do it? And how can we capture all the ideas and what is the best practices? And so I, sort of immersed myself in that world and quickly got up to speed and then was able to train people. And it's a really neat tool online where it's just like everybody's putting Post-it notes together and I'm leading them. And so it's all happening real time. So that's been fun.
Hey, let me ask you a question about that. So you're a very optimistic person. And I'm wondering, at the beginning of this, did you know right away? Like, I've seen some people pivot really quickly with their businesses, and I've seen them make really fast decisions like, okay, this is going to be long term. This is how I have to change things up. So as a person who has a positive outlook, did you know right away that you needed to make changes, or did you think, this will be over in a month and we'll just get back to normal after that time?
I think I was somewhere in between that spectrum that you just provided, because I felt that my business was definitely going to shift, because even if it kind of went back to normal, I wondered if they would be really worried about their budgets and things and flying people into meetings. So, but I was more of a, let's wait and see. Let's just take a breath. And how is this affecting my family? How is it affecting my son? I was actually more focused on my family for the first month, feeling like my business will be okay. I want to make sure my son was a senior at the time, and how is it affecting him and his ability to whole online school thing, right? But after that, after about a month or so, I kind of started feeling like I could pivot, but I'm not taking on as much business. I mean, it's not business as usual at all. But now I know I can do this kind of thing. And even keynote speaking, I was supposed to fly and do those talks, and those of course got canceled. But it was really funny watching clients not fully embrace what was happening. Well, it's still going to happen. And I'm thinking, it is not going to happen. It's like,
were those Washington State businesses or just all over the country?
Other places, but the places were still, like Chicago, that's a hotbed, So and New York was one of them. So watching them just sort of struggle internally to say, this is not happening, to close it all down, was interesting to watch unfold. But then they called back and you canceled. And, now can you give us something else that's online? So it was fun to be able to problem solve and create some business out of nothing that is my business. So that's been fun to see, challenging, different. And again, it's not like business as usual for sure. And personally, we adapting to get my son through high school. It was really kind of hard for him. At first it was easy, then it was hard. And then it became easy because it was the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, right? COVID's still going on, but at least he could graduate. That wave of that sort of up, down, up again, at least he could have that. And missing the social connection was big for him as well.
Something that you said there just triggered a thought for me. I remember hearing, this is actually something that Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun, had said once. And she said, when people come to a retreat at her retreat center, she said, it doesn't matter how long the retreat is. If the retreat is a weekend, or it's a week, or it's 3 months, there's this cycle that people go through where things are okay at the beginning, and then right in the middle, there becomes this tension, and then, kind of things go crazy. And then towards the end, it's like light at the end of the tunnel, like you said. And then you just kind of reach this point, you get over that hump and you reach this point and things get a little bit easier. I totally hear you when you talk about your son and kind of like how that progress went for him. I think the interesting thing for us is that we could probably, as a society, as a world, as a country, as a state, everybody's going through it a little bit differently. If we just had a date if we knew when that endpoint was, then we could go through that same cycle, but we don't have it.
Totally. That's why I was making that clear. Like, he had an endpoint to graduate, but I mean, I completely agree. And I mean, I'm curious, when you just brought that up, what do you think that is when we hit that down? What is happening there? What is going on?
Well, I observe it in my tours, and I always keep that in mind. Like, when there's maybe a little bit of an issue at any time, maybe people are getting tired, they're getting homesick. But I think that in the beginning, you're very excited. Things are new, things are changing. You're not quite sure what's going on. And then you start to get settled in. And then just with a tour, then you're like, in the beginning, you're getting to know each other, and you're all on board, and you're seeing new sights, and you're doing, different things. And then you start to get a little tired. I think that's just part of it, is that you start to get a little tired, whether it's a 1-week trip, like 4 nights, or whether it's a 14-day trip. And you start to get a little tired. Then when you get over that hump, then it's just that thing of like, okay, now I can kind of count down the days. And then I'll be home, and I'll get to see my partner. I'll get to see my animals. I'll get to have my own food. I don't have to have the same Indian food all the time. I can go home and have a hamburger. I can go home and have something that's familiar. So I think that's what it is. And I notice this a lot. It's, definitely there are many times when I'm looking for that cycle and I don't see it, like in my tours, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Everybody's like high energy, just everything is just great. But I do see, sometimes when it happens, and I think about that for myself too, just with whatever project I'm working on, is I just have to hunker down and get over the hump, and just like really focus so I can get to the end of that.
I wonder if there's some element of listening to you speak of, you're getting comfortable and you're adapting. And at some point you're realizing, you know what, I don't really want to adapt to this situation. I want to go back to what I'm comfortable with. So I kind of get comfortable with this new thing, but I kind of like my old thing better, like going home to my comforts. I think about that in our current situation, and, we're adapting to a new situation, and there's almost like no going back. So we're suspended in this. I'm trying to be comfortable, but I'm not exactly comfortable. Like you just said, there's no end in sight. So we're having to adapt and not know if we're ever going to find that comfort, that specific happy place that we're used to. We have to adapt and find a new happy place, I think. This really makes me think about one of the things I think about a lot from my background in endurance sports is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah, this is a huge segue, but it just feels like that may be what's kind of going on, is like we're uncomfortable and we have to adapt. And it's almost like this mindset of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So like when I went to the South Pole, I went knowing I was going to be uncomfortable. So I went on this big expedition. And so it was a choice. I chose to be uncomfortable, and I knew I was going to be uncomfortable. And somehow your mind can wrap around that a little easier. Whereas now we're in this uncertain and comfortable.
Yeah, but the thing is that you had an end date in endurance sports.
Generally speaking,
you either have an end date or an end length, right? So you're either, that you're going to run 26.2 miles. So like however long that takes you, that if you stop, then you haven't made it. You just have to keep going. Or you might be doing a 24-hour event, and you're running, to see how many miles you can run in 24 hours. that there is an end time to that. And you can wrap your mind around that. But when you just don't know, then I think that's what I'm hearing from, people that I talk to. And it's certainly something that I'm feeling, is that if I just had a date, then I could shoot for that and I could relax into it. But I don't have a date. I was talking to some friends last night on a Zoom call. We have a regular call. And someone brought up that very topic. And she said, I just wish I had an end date. And I said, yeah, like if somebody just told me, and she said April 1st, and I said February 1st, like we said it at the same time. And somebody said, oh, I think we're looking at like the middle of next year. And I was like, shut up. don't like, please don't even say that. I don't even want to know that. So I don't know, like, there's this thing that I do, kind of a trick that I play on my mind. And I may have mentioned this on the podcast before, but there's a little trick that I play that if I'm going out for a long run, and I'm in training mode, and maybe I'm training for a marathon, 26.2 miles, and my training run, let's say, is 18 miles. I tell myself that I'm going out for 22 miles that day. And so I have it in my mind that I'm doing something that's more difficult. So I'm going to go out for a 22-mile run. By the time I get to like 15, I'm like, hey, I only have 3 more miles to go. This is going to be easy. And so that way, like, I've just played this little trick on myself. But like, how do I do that? What trick do I play? With COVID, like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you just said, it's going to be another year, perhaps that's the trick. I don't know.
Well, it could be. And if I didn't have to plan so far in advance because of my business, like if I had a 9-to-5 job, and I was just doing my work and, just kind of doing my thing, then I could do that and I could live with that. But because I have to plan a year in advance, like my tours, right? I've got to plan so far in advance. It's hard to do that.
I have to say that your thought about this end date is interesting. And the only thing that I can think about from my personal life is, and other people who may have had any kind of health kind of concern that is ongoing, or if you have, my husband has stage 4 cancer. He was diagnosed 4 years ago, and you hear stage 4 and you think, that's the end, but it doesn't have to be. And his cancer, he's never had a symptom and is able to kind of have a regular life still, but yet he lives knowing he has this incurable cancer. So I really think we had this discussion early on in COVID that this COVID world feels a lot like people who are living with that kind of uncertainty for their life, because there's not really an end. Doctors have said you're learning to live with this for the rest of your life. Even if it goes away, it's likely not going to go completely away. And even if it does, it will likely come back. So you have to live with this. So for 4 years, you have this little bit of a weight on you. And gradually you have to learn to just say, it's there. I don't know when it's going to end, if it will ever end. Therefore, I have to now just embrace the moments in life, every moment, because I don't know when, what moments we're going to have or not have together. It's a really heavy topic, but it really, really feels like we were saying, I feel like the whole world understands how Marty, my husband, feels, and how many people that are like him must feel. So the empathy that we can start to feel for each other, I think, is a really interesting outcome.
Are you saying that they are saying that COVID isn't just going to go away? Is that your point? I'm
saying that the uncertainty of when it's going to go away. It could be a year. Cancer could be a year. It could be 10 years. It could, you don't know. And / it could come back, or something else could come back. It's learning to live this way. It's learning to adapt to a world that is evolving in ways that we've not had to live through before. And when we can do it, It's uncomfortable. It's learning to be comfortable with this uncertainty, this discomfort. And, I believe, and I've seen it happen, one of the side effects of all this is this learning more about your core and learning to be vulnerable as we share with each other how this feels. It's an emotion. It's deep emotion that's happening to us all. And people are uncomfortable with this emotion. And if we are willing to be vulnerable and share these emotions and share our fears and share our concerns, we are actually bonding with each other. We're connecting on a new level. I found that through my husband's cancer that has happened with our friends, our family, our community. I think it can be similar with this. I'm an optimistic person, and I would never want this to happen, but I believe it can push us to grow and learn. Hard things push us to grow and learn. That's why I choose, maybe you do too, endurance sports. They're really hard. They're hard. You don't know if you can do it. But when you move through it, then you realize something new about yourself and you're grasping onto this amazing thing that you think, I would never have thought I could do that. I'm amazing. You're amazing. People are amazing, right?
And you realize you can do more too.
You can.
There's more potential there.
There's more potential. We can endure more. And we don't want to have to endure a land of COVID, but now we know we can, and whatever comes next. It's like we build in sports, you build muscle memory and you build mental memory. And so once you've done it, once you've done something hard, you can lean into that and know, okay, I can do this too. I don't know if you find you're leaning into that. I feel like I might be. Maybe you are too.
Well, let me ask you something. Have you gone through an angry time with this? Or have you just said, okay, this is a new normal for us as a world, as a planet?
My anger hasn't been around COVID happening. My frustration, I'm not sure if anger, but a deep frustration for how the leadership in this country and around parts of the world is falling short of my expectations of what I expect. That I have felt deep frustration around that because I don't feel like that we have to be as deeply into this situation as we've fallen in the United States. And I feel like if we could focus on the facts, even though we don't know all the facts, but if we could share a common set of facts and not distract. And I don't want to get too political, but it's happening and it's a shame. That makes me really, really frustrated.
What do you do with your frustration?
Well, I don't linger on that frustration because that is not something I can control. But I do know that I speak to my friends and family a lot about issues. Well, I don't put it out on my platform of things. In person, one-on-one conversations, I do have these conversations. Our voice is our vote. So, this is something super important to me. I can't wait till in fact, I wish we could blink forward and be in November, but we aren't. So that's where I put my frustration. My frustration is like, what can we do? What can happen? Where can we actually go? Are we in a reckoning where we're like, this is too much. This is getting crazy. This is not who we are as a country. I hope for better, in the future, even if COVID continues, right?
Well, I'm delighted to hear you use the word frustration about yourself because I think that's good. I think I have a little bit more anger about it, but my anger is, I guess it's like early on, I would say I was kind of baffled, and I would just look around and I'd be wearing my mask. I'm respectful in that way. I follow those rules, but I just kind of look around and I go, how the hell did we get here? I'm like, I walk into the post office and I see Steve, the guy I always see at the post office behind the counter. And he looks at me and he's like, shrugs his shoulders. He's like, I don't know. I feel stupid wearing this mask. You look stupid wearing that mask. It's kind of that, like, how did we get here kind of thing. I almost feel like maybe with the resurgence of the cases, I'm almost accepting it now. Do you know what I mean? Like it's taken me this long. I think maybe some people might hear this and think I'm an idiot, which is okay. I'm okay with putting myself out there like that because it's taken me so long to kind of come around to this. And again, I want to emphasize that I've always been respectful of the rules and, want to make sure that other people feel comfortable around me. Like I'm not barreling into grocery stores without a mask on. It's not that kind of thing. But I've also been like, la, 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 no, we're going to get through this like quickly,
Live in a bubble. I don't want it to penetrate me. Yeah. I mean, it's all these coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a coping mechanism. And I heard this, I think she was a neuroscientist. She was on Star Talk of all places, this neuroscientist, and she was saying that we all respond to this based on like self-preservation. So people who have underlying health conditions are, furious when they see someone without a mask, and someone who owns their own business or who values their freedom over the greater good is furious that we're not opening things up, So, and when I heard that, I thought, you know what? I do have to have that empathy for other people because whatever quote unquote side they're on is we are all just trying to cope the best we can.
Right. Because I mean, like you say, self-preservation, they may think I won't have money to eat food.
Right.
So
exactly.
we all are trying to ultimately live.
Right. Yeah. Literally. Mm-hmm.
Right. So what's the best strategy to do that? Right.
Well, the thing that I'm also noticing is, I'm not a big news person. Like I know that when something big happens, it's going to come across my radar. I'm going to find out some way. But since this has happened, I feel a responsibility to be more informed. So I have been reading news more often. And as you know, I live in West Seattle and we're now an island because there's a big bridge failure and it's closed down. So I read our local news blog far more often than I should. And part of it is that on that blog, I read the comments. And it's always been a good way for me to kind of stay informed because I'm like, oh, okay, I see that person's side and I see this person's side and I can make a better decision based on that, form my opinion a little bit better. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot more anger. I'm seeing comments that are far angrier. Like you said, oh, we just need to be more empathetic. Like we've learned how to be more empathetic toward each other through this. And I think we're at a point now where we're not being more empathetic. Like I saw a guy last night. We went down to Alki Beach and we watched the comet, the Neowise comet from down there, which was really cool. And on our drive down there, it was dark out. It was about 9:30. We saw this guy crossing a crosswalk against the light. He didn't have the walk sign and he started beating on a car with his cane because the car was turning. And I heard this loud thumping. I'm like, what is that noise? And this guy is beating on this car. And I just thought, man, empathy for that guy. Like he is having a rough day of it. But this is the kind of behavior. I'm starting to see this, this real anger come out, this lashing out.
They don't know where to put that.
Yeah, where do you put it?
Right.
We don't have the coping mechanisms. We're not taught the coping mechanisms for it.
Right, and it's reaching that boiling over point where
Yeah, it is. I know. It's like a pressure cooker. The pressure cooker is like
without the little right, exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I know. Yeah, but I really appreciated early on what you said about, we're all vulnerable and, we're all going through emotional things, which for a lot of people, going through emotions is uncomfortable. And I think identifying that fact and putting language around it is like, okay, what is it that I'm going through? One thing that I've been doing, and some of this, I learn it mostly from some of the Buddhist teachings and, readings that I'm doing lately, is this thing of it's the thinking mind and the feeling body, they call it. Like those are part of your senses. And so when something comes up for me, I stop and I literally say, okay, what am I thinking? How am I thinking this through? And then where am I feeling it in my body? And then I just give myself some time to kind of sit with that. And then usually from that, some solution comes up. If it's something that I'm frustrated with, then a solution comes up and I'm like, oh, okay, well, here's another way that I could look at that and kind of figure that out. But as a culture, we are not taught how to deal with those kinds of things. We don't know, and we don't know where to go with it.
Right.
Like you said, it just boils over.
So what have you been doing anything to distract, or maybe not distract, but try to be normal in what you like to do, even though you're kind of confined in what that can be?
So there's a couple of things that have happened in my world that has affected me greatly. One thing, like this is an interesting year for me because I had fewer tours that I was planning, like offering for other people to join, because I had my own personal travel. So I had these 4 deserts, which we've talked about, have the 4 deserts planned, and one by one, they're falling. So Namibia in April got postponed / rescheduled, canceled. The Gobi in Mongolia, which would have been just maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. That one got moved. And now I'm waiting to hear about the Atacama in Chile, which is supposed to be September. And of course, it's not going to happen, but they're not announcing it. So I think they want to have an alternate plan in place before they make an announcement on it. But I just have to, until that's officially canceled, I don't feel like I can make other plans, So there's that aspect. And I'm addressing that by making up my own events. So a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, I was looking at my calendar and I was saying, okay, so I should be in a training plan for the Gobi. And, this would have taken place a couple of weeks ago. Well, I've got all this time. Why don't I just train for something else? So a couple of weeks ago, I was going to do 5 marathons in 5 days. And then I dialed it back and I said, well, I'll do 5 halves in 5 days. And so the first morning I went out and I did a half marathon. And then someone sent me a message and said, hey, I did a full marathon today. And I was like, shit, oh, up your game, Beth. What is your problem? So then I had to up my game and I ended up doing 3 marathons and 2 halves. So it's making stuff up. And awesome. I'm doing this thing where it's running every street. And so there's a lot of people around the country and around the world who are doing it. So I'm doing everything in West Seattle. So I'm contained here. So I do every street and alley. So I've kind of upped it a little bit. And I do parking lots if they show up on this map that I use. So I go out and I might be out for a couple of hours and I'm just going up and down and back and forth and, in these alleys and taking photos along the way at cool things that I see. And so and then I see my map, my heat map gets filled out. And that's a really neat thing too, because it gets me seeing things. The other day, a mile away from my house, I found this new little park that had all this really funky artwork in it. And it's like, I had no idea, so
I'm totally cool.
So I'm exploring all these new things. And like I said, just kind of making stuff up along the way, because that's how I realize that I have to have a purpose to get motivated. I'm just making up my own goals. And that's how I have to figure it out. Because if I don't have a goal or a purpose, then I just don't, I have no reason to kind of lace up and to go do something. I've got to have kind of a bigger picture around it. So is there something that you're doing? I know you've had at least one adventure so far this summer. What are you doing to kind of, because you were supposed to be in Mont Blanc, weren't you?
I was, yes. That was going to be my son's senior trip. We were going to hike around Mont Blanc. It's a 10-day outing where you hike every day and then you end up in these cool villages at night. And my niece and nephew were going to go with me. My niece, who is she's like 30 years old, and her husband. So it was going to be this big thing. And of course that got canceled. So we decided, let's go ahead and do something local. We live in this beautiful place, right? And why not? So we ended up deciding to go. It's a little early. Some of the places we wanted to go aren't opened up. Like there's a lot of snow on Mount Rainier still, as far as the Wonderland Trail goes. So we went over to Mount St. Helens, which is in southern part of our Washington state. And they have a really great 30-mile trail that circumnavigates Mount St. Helens, called the Lewitt Trail. And the main way we normally go in was closed still. So we had to rejig this new way. So it was going to be 40 miles instead of 30 miles.
Was it closed because of COVID, or it was closed because of snow?
It was closed because of snow / fixing the road to get to the main starting point. So we started at a different point that we'd never started before. Yeah. So we ended up doing that. And what was really great is we have done that trip a number of times, but my niece and her husband have not ever done it. So it was sort of making something we've done before new again. And there was all these firsts, this first time starting at this new place. And it just made it so that we would camp slightly different places. So we had a new campsite that we just loved by this water, and this waterfall is usually not really running because usually there's not as much snow, not as much water. We go a little later in the year. So usually it's just a trickle, and it was a beautiful, gorgeous waterfall that we got to camp right near. It's just so delightful. And also sharing something you love and your experience with people that are less experienced. And my niece had no experience ever backpacking. And we set them up learning how to go fast packing, we call it. So your packs are, under 20 pounds and 4 days of supplies and still fairly comfortable, just leaving all the stuff you don't need at home.
There were probably fewer people on the trail too, right?
That trail is always not many people, but there's still.
Yeah. Which trail is that? Tell me later.
Well, it definitely has some challenges on it. What was great is that my niece really, took it in stride. She knew she was walking into something that was maybe a little over her head as far as she had no experience to go fall back on. And it kind of goes back to what we've been talking about is you're walking into something that it's a big unknown and you're sort of trusting that you have what you need to get through the situation. And we ended up having a lot of problem solving happen for her. She was experiencing like her feet were hurt. It's very rocky, it's a lot of volcanic rock that you're rocking over. And so her feet were really hurting. She's in good shape and everything, but her feet were really hurting. So we're like, okay, how can we help her? So at one point I was just like, well, we have the same size. I'll just change shoes with you. Mine are super cushy and I'll wear yours. So she took my shoes, and then later on another day, you could just tell she's struggling. So we're like, well, let's just take a little weight out of your pack, just a little bit, These sorts of things helped her. And going back to the idea of vulnerability, she's a woman who is very strong, very physically strong, and doesn't want to be the person holding up the team, doesn't want to be that person who is complaining about anything. Yet she had to share like, my feet are killing me. Is there something I can do? And she wrote on a Facebook post after we got back, she said something like, here's these delightful photos. I got to see this amazing place. And it was so awesome and such a challenge and so hard at the same time. And I didn't know if I could do it and I did it. And I'm so glad I did. That mentality of going back to things being hard sometimes, we choose to go do it, right? And this beautiful place, it's replacing this other experience we were supposed to have, making the most of it. It was delightful. It was hard. And, when we get through those hard things, she's like, I learned so much about myself. I think that's really what happens. I think when we get through all of this hard stuff, we're going to have learned a lot about ourselves that we might not have wanted to know. I mean, one of the things about early on and still being so isolated, being so socially isolated, requires us to be with ourselves a lot more. We have a lot more time to not go fill it with going places, things that we like to do. We have a lot more time to choose what do we want to do with this time. And it might be more with ourselves than usual, or more with our spouse than usual, or maybe we live on our own. I really think that it's an opportunity to, what are my interests that I don't normally have time to spend on? What things might I want to develop in myself? What books might I want to read? What podcasts might I want to start listening to? So I try to look at it that way.
Well, that is a great way to look at it. I think, just the obvious difference between choosing to fast pack around Mount St. Helens and to be quarantined is that one is your choice and the other is required.
Of course. But if you're required to be quarantined, why not find things that are fun to do during that time? Right. I recognize that I just said those words and I realized, there's so many people that do not have the opportunity that I just described to take off. They may be working full time at a job that doesn't even want to, they can't even take a vacation.
Essential workers and just putting themselves at risk.
Yeah, totally. Right. But that doesn't mean there's either hopefully time in all of our days where we can spend time. To me, getting outside is my place. It's just to get outside. And it's it really is sort of a metaphor, getting outside, just getting outside all of this, getting outside all the crazy.
That's a good point.
Just turning it off. Like you said, reading the news, it's coming at you so fast and furious, and it's a lot to take in. It's like a fire hose, and it's to get away from that for even a little bit. Really, I think a positive step.
Well, I think the point of being outside too, physically being outside, I think this has been underestimated or underreported or undersuggested, is that vitamin D has been shown to be a really important factor in how people are recovering with this. Like there's been a lot of studies already that have shown that the people who are the sickest are the ones with vitamin D deficiencies. And so here we are, telling people to stay indoors when really getting outside, getting fresh air, and literally getting vitamin D is so critical. So I've been telling people from day one, like, get outside, like even if it's sitting outside on a balcony, and just getting some fresh air and getting sunshine, at least light exposure is so critical. But that goes back to the whole, one of the problems is that there's just been so much misinformation, it's, which has been disheartening.
It has been disheartening. That's a good word for that. But getting outside is also such an easy thing to do. And it's also, in quotes, safer than being inside with people.
Right.
So.
And we all have access to it.
We have access, even if it's walking down the block, and walking back. Or if you can't walk very far, just go sit outside. Like you said, just get outside. Yeah.
Totally important. So what's coming up in your future? What to keep you active and sane?
Yeah. Well, before my son heads off to college, we wanted to sneak in one more trip with him. So we're going to go do another, similar to going around Mount St. Helens, we're going to go around Mount Hood. As we were on our Mount St. Helens hike, we ran into a couple people who said, well, if you love this hike, have you ever hiked around Mount Hood? And we're like, no, we have not. So that's a 40-mile hike around Mount Hood that looks sort of similar, but a different, not as much evidence of a blowout from a eruption. So we're looking forward to doing that at the end of July, sort of another little event to keep us active, keep us going, spend some time bonding before we're separated as a family, with my son heading off. So that's super exciting. That's something fun to look forward to. And, we're lucky that we have a little gym in our garage. So we are, like you said, we're just planning and working out, just making workout goals, more strength training that I haven't been doing, which I constantly tell myself I need to do more of as I get older. Some more strength training and mixing in cross training more. I used to run a ton and I don't run quite as much. So I'm trying to do other things to fill the time that I would be running,
Yeah, I just did some strength training this morning and then went out for a little run, which is great because I've let my strength training, just like planks and lunges and that kind of thing, I've let that stuff kind of fizzle a little bit. And I should be doing more yoga because I know how healthy it is. But there's just some things I'm like, and it's funny when I came back from my little run today, because I'll do a strength session and then just go for a short run just on like tired legs. And I thought today, you can give yourself a break, Beth. Like you don't have to be perfect about everything. Like you're doing a pretty good job. I'm not a big drinker as it is. I might have I'll have a couple of glasses of champagne a couple times a year. So it's not like I'm falling into super bad habits. I might be having a little bit more chocolate or sugar than I should, but I'm not, as things go, I'm doing okay, and it's just like, I can't, on top of everything else, that's going on in the world, I can't then just make myself crazy with a lot more restrictions. Right.
I'm with you about the give yourself a break, because I don't feel like right now I didn't have like a major physical goal as far as I have to get in this awesome shape to go do this thing. You had these major events that you had planned, right? So I've been more on a maintenance mode just to be able to do the things that I know my body can do with maintenance mode, right? Mm-hmm. So I was just out running over the weekend with a friend of mine. We ran up Mount Tenerife and back down. Well, ran meaning kind of hike, run uphill. But I had not done that in so long, and I had kind of forgotten what my body used to be able to do that really easily, and now it's much harder because I haven't been training as hard for that. And I said to myself, "Don't say you should be in better shape. This shouldn't feel so hard because I haven't tried to be in better shape." So I was just thankful that I could do it at a different speed than I used to be able to do it. And I was talking to my friend about that. And I said, I'm at a point where I don't know if it's just where I am in my life or COVID or what, but it's like, I'm happy to exercise almost every single day and get a good workout. And if it's not like the hardest thing, that's okay. If one of those is just a 7-mile walk with my dog in the forest, I'm happy. That's workout, It's an evolution. I think health, physical goals they kind of come in waves sometimes because we can't be at that peak all the time,
Well, there's training and then there's exercise. So when you have an event, then you're training for that event
training.
And you've got,
that's right.
Goals that you're really paying attention to. Otherwise you're exercising, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but just keeping that kind of in that maintenance mode. I just remembered seeing something, it might have been in the New Yorker. It was a series of cartoons it was like about cognitive dissonance. And they were funny little cartoons. And it was like, I want to lose weight, yet I'm eating a loaf of bread, homemade bread every day kind of thing. And it was like, it was just like the things we tell ourselves and then the things that we actually do. And but I think what's important there is to identify the fact, like you said, is like, give yourself a break. Be honest with yourself. If you're going to eat that loaf of bread, or you're going to eat that, at least enjoy it. Or if you're going to eat that whole bar of chocolate, at least enjoy it, and give yourself a break over it. But don't fool yourself because the pain comes when you beat yourself up over, I was going to lose weight, but I can't because I find myself eating too much junk during this. But either let it go or embrace it and actually commit to taking care of yourself in that way. Oh gosh, anything else that we should chat about? I don't have any like, do these 3 things, people. That's, I think everybody's got to get through this in their own way. I was talking to John this morning and we were just kind of sitting out having coffee and I had expressed to him, I was like, I'm having a little bit of a difficult time getting motivated today. And I said, but I'm having some caffeine, which I normally don't have. And I'm like, it's like a miracle drug, like that's my drug. It's like caffeine. So I'm like, I'm feeling a little bit more perky. And I said, but you don't seem to go through these things like that kind of emotional roller coaster or lacking motivation. And he said, I have a body and I have 2 legs and 2 arms and I'm capable of things. And it's really special that we are here. We're like on this planet at this time. And I don't want that to go to waste. And I was like, oh, I know that, right? I don't know that 24 hours a day. I don't know that every day of the week. But it was a good reminder for me this morning that no matter what's going on, that we're lucky to be here and that we should take full advantage of that. And we have a responsibility really to take advantage of it and to do what we can, make the best use of our capabilities.
I agree with that. Our time is limited. We don't know how much time we have. And so make the best of it. I love that. The other thing you made me think of with saying that is that when we talk to my son about these times, we say, he doesn't have the perspective that we do in the years that you see there's ups and downs. And we realize he sort of has a bookended life right now. When he was born, it was 1 month after 9/11 happened. And the world was in a different state of chaos than it is today. And now today it feels like a new kind of chaos. And so as he was heading off to college, he's had these 2, bookends to his life. And we're like, in some ways you're going to look back at this part of your life as you age and see, I was sort of lucky to live through this time, to have experienced this historical, monumental event when I was a senior in high school. And we were talking to him about imagining him describing that to his kids. And sure, there could be something else, but to have lived through, endured the adversity, and you came through, how did it change you? How did you grow? Only time will tell.
That, maybe just to put a little pin in it with one last thing here. So last night I mentioned that we went to see the Neowise comet. And on a blog, I saw like someone was saying, oh, we're all meeting up at this, like a socially distant, but I'm suggesting that people meet up in this one spot down on Alki Beach, bring your binoculars, etc. And I thought, oh, that's cool. We want to go see that. And there'll be people there. So we'll kind of know where to look in the sky and kind of have a little help. So that was very exciting to me. And somebody posted on a comment and they said something like, I'm not going to lose sleep over something as like a comet. And I don't know if you know this, but NEO-wise, you wouldn't be visible on the planet again for another 6,000 years. So to me, I'm like, oh, this is a pretty special event. This is really cool. This is worth staying up past my bedtime for, basically. But this person was kind of poo-pooing it. And I thought of the Helen Keller quote that life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And I just think that we have to embrace every day like that because it's just a daring adventure. And how are we going to approach it and make the most of it?
I agree. In the midst of this storm, there's cool comets to look at.
There are
awesome things out there waiting for us.
There are. And the bird life, the wildlife. I hear lots of people tell stories about the wildlife. A friend of mine described the birth of a deer in her backyard last week. This deer just got dropped in her backyard. Wow. And she watched it, because she's working from home. She got to experience this whole thing, watching the little foal, kind of wake up and shake off its legs and move around. I know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are little special events like that. Oh, Chris, thank you so much. Just you're a ray of sunshine. It's so nice to chat with you. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Super. We'll maybe circle back around in another month or so when it'll feel like a year. We'll see what's happening then.
We'll see what's happening. Maybe we should write down predictions and then see if they come true.
I know. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, thanks again for your time.
Thanks.
That was pretty special, wasn't it? That's a conversation I'll have to keep in my podcast app and come back to every couple of weeks as we continue moving through this pandemic. If you feel the same, please do share this with others. I think it's really important to hear some positivity coming out of this whole thing, and Chris certainly exudes that. If you enjoyed today's episode, I've had several other conversations with Chris, and you can find them on episodes number 88. That was our original conversation, number 115, and number 120. You can find those and all of my other episodes, as well as links to all the things we chat about at shesboldpodcast.com/episodes or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing the uplifting stories from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guest. To keep up with me, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Witwa and Wandergal. Feel free to leave a message or question at 877-280-5170. I really, really appreciate feedback. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. Let me know if you have any suggestions for future guests and or topics. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.